Welcome to the Embracing Grace podcast. I'm your host, Cindy Nicholson. Always remember, you are loved, chosen, and redeemed. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm so glad that you are joining me today. This is the Embracing Grace podcast, and with me is the lovely Sara Paxton, and she is going to be sharing, I think, what a lot of us need to hear today. We're going to be talking about health, but we're also going to be talking about health and faith and how that is interlinked. So welcome, Sara. I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm very excited about today.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm so excited too. I'm so excited we met and connected, and I'm really excited to share this message.
I love it. So, Sara, tell us a little bit more about who you are, and then afterwards you can share about a little bit more about what you do as a profession.
You bet. So my name is Sara Paxton. I am a wife to my husband Darby, and we've been married for 20 years this fall. And we have 5 boys. The oldest just graduated. I also have a junior in high school, a freshman, a 7th grader, and a 5th grader. So yeah, we keep very busy with those boys. But yeah, I was actually a pharmacist for, almost 18 years, I think, when I decided to basically turn most of everything I did into health coaching, and really with a functional medicine perspective. Because what I found was, I think the pharmacy world is amazing in the fact that, there are a lot of life-saving drugs. There's a lot of things out there, that a lot of advances we've made that are just remarkable. But what I found was we were often using it as a band-aid. And I think that symptoms are a blessing. Symptoms are something that we need to learn from and look at and say, hey, why am I having these headaches? Why am I having this, skin rash? Instead of just giving a medication for it, we need to ask the why. So I really got into health coaching about 5 years ago, and have just, kind of moved forward with that in gut health, namely gut health, blood sugar health, and now I'm working on hormones. So it's pretty exciting.
So let's jump into the questions. So
Awesome.
I hope that you all are feeling inspired and encouraged by what we've been talking about. And a lot of these questions I know is going to resonate with a lot of you, because I think that opening it up to the newsletter and some to my friends and just other, platforms, social media platforms, the type of questions that we've received back are really ones that are so general, yet very specific. But general because I'm sure that there are many people that are experiencing so much of what we're going to talk about and what Sara's going to share on. So let's jump in. So the first one was from Elaine, who asks, are probiotics really helpful for someone who has occasional IBS? So I know that we've touched on it. I
Yeah,
don't know if
we
you want
have.
to share a little bit more.
I do want to share just a little bit about IBS too. So IBS is irritable bowel syndrome, which is basically, it's kind of just a diagnosis of, we don't really know what's going on, but this is what we're going to tell you. And that's kind of what maybe I was diagnosed with at first. And there's things like Bentyl or dicyclomine or different, maybe Miralax or just different things that they want to give you for again, symptoms. But again, IBS has a root cause, and we have to get to that. But yeah, it's kind of like the weeds in the garden thing. A lot of times if we add a probiotic, it's just going to maybe worsen our symptoms, maybe not help our symptoms. But again, it's that 4-step process. So the probiotics is really step 3. And a lot of times we have to go through step 1 and 2 first for that to really be effective.
So just on that, what would you remove?
Yeah, great. So the remove, a lot of times, again, the first thing we're going to try to really remove is the irritating foods. So a lot of times that for a lot of people looks like and I don't know, in the UK I know there is a lot of actually really good, there's more food restrictions, and you guys don't allow so many ingredients that I know that are allowed in the United States, like different things. And I'm not for sure what all, but like they'll show, like the flavored oatmeal in the United States versus Europe, and it's totally, you guys have way less ingredients, way more wholesome ingredients, but there still are some processed things that we can watch. And one of the things that I tell people is gluten is really hard on our intestinal system. So do you remember when we talked about actually that one cell thick,
Yeah.
what's supposed to be impermeable wall? What gluten actually does is it has a protein in it called gliadin that actually breaks those tight junctions between those cells and causes that leaky gut. Now, our body, God made our bodies so beautiful, and we do have a repair mechanism that is able to repair those. However, if we consume too much gluten all the time and that persistence and whatever, our bodies can't keep up with the repair mechanisms. And so that's where, there's this one doctor that's really, big in the gluten research world. He will say that could happen when you're 2, it could happen when you're 22, it could happen when you're 82. When you start to have symptoms because your repair mechanisms are not able to
Wow.
keep up with the amount that you're eating. Now, I do know, like a lot of times in Europe, there's a flour called einkorn flour, which is EINKORN. And it's like never been hybridized. It has way less gluten. That is actually a flour I buy for my family here because most all the flour that we can buy in the United States is hybridized and it contains 10 times the amount of gluten that
Wow.
flour before hybridization did. So again, it's kind of that thing, people will say to me, you say that, to eat the foods that God made and God put on the earth, but why do you not like wheat, why do you not like flour,
That's
and
a
I'm
good
just like, you're
question.
right, that's a very good question, but it's what man did to wheat.
Yeah.
It isn't the wheat that God created that's necessarily causing us the issues. It's what we did to wheat. So
Okay.
very good question. So that's one of the things we would remove. And I always say, a lot of times I say limit. When we say I can't, again, it's our words. When we
Mm.
say I can't have something, immediately our brain goes into either I can't do that, or it's
Mm.
like I immediately want that thing. So we have to change it to like I'm not going to eat as much as this as I once did, or I'm going to limit it
Yeah.
and just have it as a treat type of thing.
Yeah, I choose.
Give that, yes, give
Mm.
your body like that chance to recover and repair and whatnot. So that is one of the things, again, like processed foods, like your foods that, yeah, like sometimes the things that we put in the microwave, the things that are at the gas stations, those types of things, a lot of times have so many damaging ingredients in them that really are just rocking our health, And so we need to really cut the processed foods, but also we're removing that bad bacteria. And so, for some people that may look like I have, some herbal antimicrobials that I'm like, okay, this may be something that you would benefit from. And those would help actually remove the bad bacteria so that when we come to that reinoculate phase, it's like removing those weeds, right?
Yeah.
So those are some of the things. Sugar is a big one. Sugar, bad bacteria love sugar. I mean, they feed on it. It's this vicious cycle because they feed on it. They make us want more sugar. A lot of times when people have sugar cravings, I tell them it's not necessarily your fault. It's more like you have bad bacteria in your gut that are saying, I want sugar. And there's
Yeah.
this, you've probably heard of the gut brain axis, but basically there's this super highway. It's this nerve between our gut and our brain. And that is why feelings of mood, like or mood stabilization, brain fog, anxiety, depression, ADHD, all those things, those things are related to our gut health because most of the nerves in the vagus nerve go from the gut
Mm,
to the brain, which is
mm.
incredible, right? And so we just really have to treat our gut well so that it affects our brain. I mean, I can't believe the amount of, people that are like, I feel so much better, like anxiety and depression wise, when I corrected my gut.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope that answers
Oh,
your question.
absolutely. I'm sure that's very helpful. Thank you. Um,
Yes.
so Tracy asks, she says, my daughter was diagnosed with celiac disease, and we're standing in faith for her healing. What can we do to keep her the healthiest possible until her healing manifests?
Yes. So celiac obviously is very different, or not very different, but it is like basically that is gluten free. I mean, if she is probably
Mm,
she is not going to be able to eat gluten again without having some major side effects from that. But no, very good question. So one of the first things I would say is a lot of anti-inflammatory foods. So like clean proteins, meats, fish, beef, chicken that are, I a lot of times say, just again, eating the foods that God put on the earth. So your veggies, your berries, good oils, good fats, like olive oil is amazing. Avocados are amazing. Those types of things are just actually healing to our gut. I would also say collagen might be something that could be included in that to help with that gut wall. But another thing is a good multivitamin might be beneficial in this situation. There's also healing herbs, which these kind of have funny names like slippery elm is a good one.
mhm.
Marshmallow root. It's not like the
Yeah,
marshmallows
not
that we buy. Yes, but those things are very good at like healing the gut wall as well.
mm,
Um, and then I would say like a lot of times with celiac, what happens is you don't have those intestinal villi or the capability of absorbing nutrients like maybe she once did. And so yeah, like a good multivitamin. A lot of times I say multivitamins that we buy in the stores aren't great. I usually say buy a multivitamin in a capsule. Then it's going to be absorbed well. And yeah.
so not
So
gummies, in other words.
right. I
Not
don't gummies are okay. I would one of my favorites is by Pure Encapsulations, and it's just called ONE. It's O period N period E period. And it's a multivitamin by Pure Encapsulations. I love that one because also the form, like for example, vitamin B12 can come in a cyanocobalamin or methylcobalamin. We always want methyl. Like it is better absorbed if you have genetic conditions that you aren't able to methylate, like some people, you'll just accumulate that cyanocobalamin and never absorb it. And so we could go into a
yeah.
whole nother episode just on that. But I do think the encapsulated multivitamins are like it so that you're getting it more in a powder form that's able to be broke down is very important.
Yeah. So if kids
Yes.
are under 10, would you advise the same?
Good question. No, I would probably try to find maybe something a little different because that might be too much. I do know women that will like dump out half the capsule and give that to their
Yeah.
child, which you could do if you really wanted to. But yes, I would probably say, and maybe is there a way that we could like link this in the comments or something?
Mm,
I could find, yeah, a
yeah,
multivitamin for
absolutely.
more of a
I
child.
know who
Yeah.
she is, so I can share that.
Perfect.
I can share that
Perfect.
information. I've
Yes.
been taking notes, so that'll be
Yes.
great. Yeah. Okay, so her second question was, can you also recommend the best way to reduce constipation in children under 10, please?
Oh, yeah. Yes. So, yeah, I mean, in the conventional world, it's things like Miralax, that kind of thing. But I'm not a big fan of Miralax. I feel like magnesium citrate is a really good way to reduce constipation. And I would say constipation, this is a very good point that I kind of want everyone to remember. Constipation is toxic. We
Mm,
can actually
sure.
reabsorb back those toxins that our body is it's supposed to exit. we can reabsorb that back into our bloodstream. Remember that gut wall lining is thin, and we start to reabsorb those toxins again, and we need to be getting rid of them. And so it's very important that we always address constipation. But mag citrate is really good. You can take it in a capsule form, and usually with someone under 10, I would say maybe like 200 milligrams at bedtime is good. Mag's really good at making us sleep well. And a lot of us are super deficient in magnesium. I mean, I think they say like 80 to 90% of people are deficient in
Wow.
magnesium. So yeah, I there's a product called Natural Calm, I believe, and it's a powder that you just put in water and drink. It's very
Okay.
simple. Yeah,
I'll Google it. I'm sure you could find it on Amazon if it's
yeah,
not, because she's in France. So I'm not
yes.
sure what they would find there, but
Yes. Yes, you
yeah.
should, it's available on Amazon, I know. Yes,
Okay.
correct.
All right. I'll tell her to check.
Great.
Great. And then Sasha asks, she says, I get tired and sleepy immediately after I eat. It does not matter the time of day or whether I'm eating a few grapes or a heavy meal. Please, can you help?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's pretty common. You know, like, it's kinda like, "Oh, I need a nap after I eat."
We've got something in
Uh,
South Africa, and it does not translate to English very well, which says maag is vol, oog is toe. And it literally means like stomach's full, eyes closed, because it's like this
yes.
invisible little lines that just pull your eyes closed as soon as your tummy's full. Sounds better
Yes.
in
Oh my
Afrikaans.
gosh, so true. Well, foods high in tryptophan can do that. I know, like, they've always said, like, after Thanksgiving and a turkey dinner, but a lot of times, really what the issue is, it can be some, dysbiosis, which again, dysbiosis is the word for that unbalance of good bacteria and bad bacteria. And so maybe, like, a common reason is we're not breaking down that food as we should. We just aren't. We are like, it's sitting in our gut, and we all the blood from our body is like leaving our brain, leaving and going to the gut. And so we lose energy from that and that kind of thing.
Mm,
But the other reason can be blood sugar issues. So a lot of times, like grapes can definitely cause blood sugar issues because grapes actually have quite a bit of sugar in them. Um, but not that grapes are bad. It's just that sometimes when we have this blood sugar spike, and I work a lot with people and their blood sugars, it's going to immediately, the higher the spike, the lower the dip. And a lot of times down at this dip, that's where you're just like
wow.
hangry, tired, frustrated. Like that's where we can really
Mm,
feel that after meal effect as well.
mm.
But a lot of times, yeah, after we have a heavy meal, it's due to poor digestion, usually due to gut issues. But it can also be those blood sugar spikes. So that, yeah, it could be either one.
So what do you do? What do you
Yeah, so I would
suggest?
say right. I mean, a lot of times it requires fixing the gut, right?
Mm,
We have to be able to fix the gut. Now, there's something else that I haven't really brought up yet, but that would go good in here. Another thing that's like can be a game changer is not drinking water with your meals. That is a big
really?
game changer. Yes, because here's why. You've got to think of your gut. Sorry, let's think of your stomach, and your stomach has stomach acid, right? And that acid is necessary. It's necessary for breaking down that food so that it can go into your intestines and be absorbed, right? But if we are immediately drinking water with our meal and diluting that stomach acid,
Wow.
it is a lot of times just going to sit in our belly for a long time and not do what it's supposed to do. And so that's really, really important that we have to
Mm,
drink our water between meals. And it's so funny. And I've even heard this, and I don't know, maybe you can tell me, Cindy, if this is true, but I've heard that in Europe, they are better about like a lot of times in restaurants, they'll even just put just a little cup of water by your meal. But like in the States, we have like this giant glass of water with our meals and people, we're just chugging it all. And then we just feel,
yes.
you kind of that distension, that, oh my gosh. And that's where we get reflux too. Because if you think about it, we have it's a thing called a sphincter between the stomach and the esophagus called the esophageal sphincter. And it's not really supposed to let contents back up. But when we've got so much pressure in the
Yes.
stomach because we've not only ate a big meal, but then we drank a bunch. And so we've distended the stomach. That pressure, is causing that esophageal sphincter to open and
Mm.
cause that reflux. So a big thing with people with reflux, I'm like, try to limit your water during meals. Sips, like we should be chewing our food good enough that we don't need to necessarily wash it down.
Yes.
If you do, just a sip. Like don't
Yeah.
guzzle water. That's a very, very important step in digestion. And people will notice big changes just from doing that.
So do you recommend that there's a time before and a time
Yeah,
after? You should
great
serve like
question.
a half an hour to an hour before, half an hour after.
You nailed it. It's those two, yeah, 30 to 60 minutes before stop drinking and
Oh,
don't
that's
start
good.
drinking. I usually say don't start drinking till like an hour after. Just because you really want that food to be fully digested, or just really let that stomach acid do its work before you start drinking again. Yeah.
I smile because I think sometimes that I'm being healthy by having water instead of having like
No.
something else.
How many times have we not been told, like, oh, if you drink more water,
Yeah.
then you're going to feel more full and you're not going to eat as much? Well, that's great, but it's really affecting your digestion. I would say, even between meals, sometimes it's like, oh, maybe you think you need a snack. Well, maybe just drink water instead. And I have so many people tell me, they're like, man, it's great because I'll drink the water and then I'm like, well, I can't have the snack now because I just drank the water. So it helps in several ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very common thing that we're used to doing, and it's maybe a little bit difficult to break at first, but once you do, you're like, yeah, it's just so funny how much better I feel when I
Yeah.
don't drink with meals. Yeah.
So that goes for any drinks then, really.
Yeah, really. It does. It does. Like tea, anything. Yeah. I
During
would
meals,
say just what's that?
during meals, I mean.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Try to do it between meals.
Mm. I
Yes.
never knew that. I never even
Yeah.
thought about it, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it makes
Yeah.
so much sense.
It makes so much sense. I'm like, that is a free thing, like that's not costing you anything, and that can
Yes,
be big changes. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
absolutely. Oh my goodness. Okay. Let's go. So Jessica asks, she says oat milk. I've heard that oat milk can affect your blood sugar in a bad way. I've replaced dairy with oat milk, but I'm now concerned that it may affect my blood sugar levels negatively. Are there healthy alternatives to dairy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So sometimes oat milk too can have a lot of like emulsifiers and different ingredients in it that aren't great. You're absolutely right that oat milk will generally raise our blood sugar, even more than, maybe just actual dairy. When people are drinking dairy, I usually say stick with like more like the higher fat. Like skim milk is not doing us any favors. Like we want to do the whole milk, that kind of thing. But I don't generally, I'm not the biggest milk fan. So like a lot of times, even if I'm making smoothies and that kind of thing, I'm mixing mine with just water. um but if you like to put it maybe in your coffee or something like that, if it's not a very large amount, it's probably going to be fine. But right, if you're drinking a full thing of, oat milk, it definitely will raise your blood sugar. And one of the things that we really work on is blood sugar issues. I mean, we could do a whole nother episode just on blood sugar issues, but yes, that is like a lot of times for me in my coffee, I will just do like a heavy cream because that does not raise your blood sugar really at all, because it's just like more of a healthy fat that is basically going to keep my blood sugar very level. But oat milk
Mm.
definitely will cause it to go up and back. But again, if you're using a very little amount, like in coffee,
Yes.
it's probably not going to affect it that much. So that's kind of a hard question. I would say always look at your labels. I think that's really important. Like, okay, what other ingredients? Like, you're going to see some names that you don't know. Maybe Google it, and like if it's got guar gum is one of them that not the best.
Yeah.
There used to be an app called the Sift app, but I want to say that I don't know if that, but there are sometimes there's these food apps where you can actually scan the labels and whatnot, and they'll tell you what ingredients in it aren't good.
Mm.
But I think being a food label reader is just a very good next step in your health. Learning what those words mean, and today we have all of that at our fingertips. Like we
For
can just
sure.
it up immediately and find out, what's
Mm,
good and what isn't. Yeah.
mm. Okay.
So,
So in terms of, I guess, healthy alternatives to dairy, because are you
yeah.
saying that dairy is not as bad as we think?
So I usually tell people now when we're going through the gut health protocol, we do limit some dairy. I definitely like milk again can very much raise our blood sugars. I like to, we don't want to have like a ton of added hormones, that kind of thing with our dairy. But I myself, honestly, I now that I'm not that I my gut is better and okay, let me back up. A lot of times when we're going through that remove phase, we're going to have to remove some foods that eventually we can add back in, and we're not going to have issues with them
Mm,
anymore. Maybe it even means us doing a food sensitivity test and finding out, like, oh, yeah, I do have a food sensitivity to dairy or eggs. Like, eggs is a big one. But eggs are a superfood. Like, eggs are really, really good for you. However, when you've got leaky gut, those egg proteins getting into the bloodstream is a bad thing. Like they can make you feel really yucky. And so once we then go through that whole process, then I teach you how to add back in those foods that maybe were once causing you issues and now they won't. So what I will say is a
mm,
lot of times when we're going through the gut health thing, if I'm wanting to decrease inflammation and decrease some like common food allergies and intolerances, dairy will be one of the things that I tell you to cut back on, to limit. But like me now, I have and dairy used to cause me to break out like crazy because a lot of times acne is related to our gut. Now I have dairy like almost every day in my coffee and different things. But I eat good forms of dairy like yogurt. But anyways, I don't break out really at all
mm.
anymore, just due to the fact that I healed my gut and now I tolerate
Wow.
it.
So Ramona asks, she says, how do you decrease bad cholesterol levels without using cholesterol medication?
Yeah, well, I love that you don't want to use cholesterol medication because a lot of those meds are, whew, they've got some bad side effects. Like statins can be very hard on our muscles. It causes our CoQ10 to deplete, which is necessary for energy, necessary for muscle, necessary for heart muscle. So I love that you want to change that without medication. But yeah, blood sugars are one of the best ways to actually decrease cholesterol. So it's that inflammation that we get when we have high blood sugars all the time, and that's why diabetes and heart disease are so very much related, is because then it's that inflammation in that blood vessel. When we have that with high cholesterol, that it can be very damaging, and we just are lowering the amount of blood flow through that vessel and whatnot, because it's not only inflamed, but there are like plaques in there as well, right? And so I usually say, cutting cholesterol, that is not the problem. I mean, cholesterol is necessary for hormones. Cholesterol, healthy fats are necessary for hormones. And that's another reason statins can be so hard on our hormones, is
Mm,
because we're cutting that down too much. And now we're not getting the necessary hormone production that we need. And so it goes back to the root cause. We have to really work on our blood sugars. So what I work with women is I will help them to keep their blood sugars in a certain range. So a lot of times we're even having them monitor their blood sugars after they eat. So usually 85 to 110 is the range that we want them to be in. So let's say you eat a big meal. Like, okay, let's talk back to the lady who said the grapes and the heavy meal are causing her, you know, I reckon, 45 minutes to 45 to 75 minutes. So 45, 60, 75 minutes after the meal. Everybody kind of peaks at a different time. And sometimes you have to figure out where that peak is for you. But test your blood sugar and see, if it's out of that 110 range. If it's like 130, well, yeah, that's the reason that you're kind of feeling cruddy after that meal, is
mm,
because your blood sugar peaked way too high. We should be between 85 and 110 all day long. And if we can do that, we can help reverse diabetes. We can help lower blood cholesterol, and that is usually, a big cause of why people are having high cholesterol. And
mm,
triglycerides, I feel like, are even a something more to look at than LDL. A lot of times we're just looking at the LDL, and I'm like, you have to look at the triglycerides too.
mm.
So Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I hope that answered
Yeah.
your question, Ramona. So Joey asks, how do you keep your arteries from plugging up? And question two is, how can you avoid blood clots? She's 47. So I don't know. I mean, you'll be able to tell me if that even relates to one another or if we should treat it separately.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay. So kind of this is a good segue from the last question because we
Oh,
were
brilliant.
basically talking about that insulin resistance and those high blood sugars. So of course, foods that cause high blood sugars are, your higher glycemic foods, right? And they're going to cause our blood to be a little bit more sticky. And they are more, going to cause that, ability to be able to clot anytime that we have a lot of insulin resistance, and we have like chronic high blood sugars. Okay. So usually I say really look at those, low glycemic foods like your healthy meats, your clean proteins, your healthy fats, like again, olives, avocados, olive oil, nuts. All of those are very, very good. And then those fruits and veggies. Now, fruits can be tough. Like bananas and grapes are probably more of your high glycemic. Watermelon, those are higher glycemic. But like your berries are phenomenal usually, like your blueberries, your raspberries, your blackberries don't raise that blood sugar. So what I usually say is anti-inflammatory foods, like kind of the ones I just mentioned, foods that aren't going to raise your blood sugar. I would say too, like hormone replacement therapy and birth control pills are very likely to contribute to clots as well. So a lot of times, when people are having issues with their hormones, we try to do a lot of that naturally, instead of, and a lot of it's just through insulin actually. So this may be, you know, news as well, is the fact that insulin is like the master hormone. Insulin is the king of hormones. So when we control our insulin and keep our blood sugars very stable, then the other hormones follow suit. So like that, I just had a lady in the last few months that was just having very irregular cycles and was having to go on some HRT for that, and we just managed her blood sugars, and she had like is having normal cycles again because their food is like the one thing that we can change that can make such a big difference naturally,
Yeah.
but it's if we just realize how much our blood sugars actually have to do with the rest of our health, it's incredible. It's incredible. Yeah.
Do people have to, I mean, what if somebody's blood sugar is normal? I mean,
Yeah.
they had it tested and they're not peaking. How would you manage everything else?
Right. Then we also obviously are always going to look at gut health, that kind of thing. But
Mm,
the other thing that we're really going to look at, and this goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, is our cortisol levels and okay, how much stress are we having? So I had a gal the other day that she's like, Sarah, I was testing my blood sugar. I have the same breakfast every single morning, but this morning it was high. It was so much higher. It was in like the 130s, and normally it's like 105.
mm,
I said, "What happened that morning?" And she said, "Actually, my son and I got in an argument." And I said, "That
wow.
is why your blood sugars were high." So stress alone, because cortisol, when we get stressed, we release cortisol. And cortisol actually causes us to put glucose into our bloodstream because we're only meant to be stressed if we're like being attacked,
Yeah.
by by a predator, right? That is when,
Yeah.
but we're stressed when we're driving to work, before we leave work, when we drive to work, when we get to work, when we come home from like, we tend to be a society that allows stress to affect us on every level of our lives,
Yes.
where right we have a
Wow.
constant outpouring of glucose in our bloodstream. So that kind probably, I don't know if that really answers your question, because you're saying what if their blood sugars are actually normal. The other thing we're always going to look at, right, is the gut as well. But yeah, I does that answer your
Yeah, I
question,
mean,
Cindy?
for me, I mean, in terms of keeping your arteries from plugging up, that I mean,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that all just relates to food.
Then I would say, sorry, yeah, I
No,
kind
no.
of forgot the original question. So, I would say, another thing that's good is like omegas. Omegas, even if you have to take maybe a supplement of omega threes, that's going to be very good at helping with that stickiness and that ability to clot. Turmeric is another very good. If you like cook with like curry, turmeric, that's very good. Vitamin D, I think, has a bit of a role in that as well. So all of those things, right, and managing our stress is going to really help with that clotting ability.
Sure.
Exercise is always good. We always
Mm,
want to keep that blood, flowing good through our, the muscles, even to contract those blood vessels. So exercise plays an important role in that as well.
yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And then avoiding blood clots, would that be similar line?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
All right, great. Um, Melissa asks, what suggestions do you have that can help me to stop burping? And I think we sort of covered that earlier. And also, what about acid reflux? How can I prevent it?
Yeah. So right, that's kind of a what we talked about before, that
Mm,
not drinking water is a big one during meals. But then I would also say the acid reflux is often due to a bug called Helicobacter pylori, and there are some like natural supplements again that you can just get off like Amazon, that can help eradicate that along with diet changes. But I highly recommend doing like the 4-step gut health reset. Um, always start with the water thing. If the water thing helps it, that's gonna benefit you in a lot of ways. But then I would say maybe there's more to that. You have a bacteria causing that reflux. And so then it would be something like the 4R program. And even just making simple diet changes like, okay, I'm gonna stop drinking water with meals, and I'm going to cut sugar and cut flour or gluten.
mm,
Those, and I say cut, I really mean limit,
limit.
because right, when again, we don't wanna say cut, we wanna use the words like, "I'm only gonna have it once in a while." Those 2 things and eating more of those anti-inflammatory foods can really, really help.
Okay. And supplements to help, what would you suggest?
Yeah, so oh my gosh, that's a good one. Zinc carnosine has been shown to help. I'm trying to think what the ones are for Helicobacter. Mastic gum is one. But again, that's something that you would have to do, like what you're doing when you're taking those. But those are two that I know that have shown
Mm,
good effectiveness in people with
yeah.
H. pylori is the other name for that. So, but that's usually what's causing acid reflux.
And it's probably more helpful to work with somebody like yourself to
Sure.
go on
Yes.
this
I
journey
mean, I think so
process.
because it is a process, and right.
Absolutely.
And you want to make sure it's not like interacting with other, any other medications or supplements that you're taking and that
For
kind of thing.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, great. Um, Agneta asks, she says, so part one, can emotions and trauma affect the gut? If so, what would be the best treatment? And then part two was vice versa. If the gut is
Sure.
unbalanced, would that affect emotional state?
Yeah. So, okay, when I talked about, cortisol being our stress response and that kind of that Vegas superhighway. So, we have to remember, like, when we are in fight or flight, which is our basic cortisol response, we are not able to be in rest or digest, which is the offset response, right? So a lot of times, we need to really work on our emotions and what state we are. I heard somebody the other day say, we can't help what stressors we have coming our way, but we can help our response to that stress. And
Yes.
they called it our responsibility, like
Mm,
responsibility. And I was like, that's genius, because we have an ability to be able to respond in any way, right?
mm,
And so when we have those emotions and whatnot, if we're chronically in this state of, again, stress all the time, that's very much affecting our cortisol, which affects our gut, and it's all super interconnected, right? So
Mm,
we have to remember that. But also, let's talk about the other way. So that Vegas superhighway, when when we have bad gut balance or dysbiosis, we're not making, so basically our gut bugs are not synthesizing from the food we eat the neurotransmitters we need to feel good. So things like serotonin, dopamine, GABA, those are three big neurotransmitters that are actually synthesized by the gut bacteria in the gut that travel to the brain. Super important, because serotonin, what is that? Serotonin is the one that, like, the feel good hormone. It helps with happiness, it helps with our moods. Dopamine's helping with memory, focus. So people that are having issues, with ADHD or attention or brain fog, that is often a dopamine issue.
mm,
GABA is an inhibitory transmitter. So a lot of times when we have feelings of fear and that kind of thing, nervousness, we're lacking some GABA, and the GABA is actually helping us to feel that sense of calm. And so it's just really important that we also take care of our gut, because what happens in our gut affects
mm,
our brain and affects, um our emotions and that kind of thing. So right, it's like a two-way thing. We
mm.
don't want, our response to that stress to be so great that we're not able to digest properly, but we also need to take care of our gut so that it takes care of our head.
Sure. Wow. It is really interesting how the one can affect the other. I mean, I don't think it's something that
Unbelievable.
we pay attention to really, um,
Yeah,
but it
it
does.
is. And you know
Mm,
what's so incredible? They've done this research on mice where they will sever that vagus nerve. So, okay, let's say I don't remember the exact study, but it was something along these lines. Let's say and I think it was with obesity. They actually gave a ideal body weight mouse the gut bacteria. They put that in the obese mouse, and the obese mouse lost weight,
wow.
right? But if they would like sever that nerve and do the same thing, that wouldn't happen. So it's incredible that that vagus nerve is allowing that communication between the gut and the brain that cause,
Mm,
so many aspects of our health. It's
mm,
incredible. Yeah.
yeah. Wow.
So,
All right.
yeah.
Um, then the other question that she had was, my belief is that using essential oils, which are very
Mhm.
clean and have high frequency, can aid gut problems. What are your thoughts about this?
I do think essential oils are fantastic in a lot of ways. In fact, like cinnamon oil can be a great oil for actually like helping to kill some bad bacteria and without harming the good bacteria. However, like ingesting oils is something that like I highly recommend
Yeah,
doing with, a practitioner that
for
is
sure.
able to be doing that. But another thing I would say that is huge in that process is how like oils are playing such a big role in calming us and that cortisol response. Like there's so many good calming oils. I think one of them that I just recently learned about was the clary sage. It's very good at just giving us a calm response. So again, that's going to affect our whole body on so many different levels. But yeah, I'm learning more about oils actually right now. I haven't. That's actually part of my hormone course. We learn about oils in that. So I'll learn more as we go along, and hopefully we'll have another
Okay.
one of these that I can share more of that with you.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to have another one of these.
Yeah. Awesome.
Oh. So Jody asks, she says, question one is, what is the effect of the gut on the brain and memory? So
Okay.
if it does, is there any way to improve memory by improving gut health?
Oh, so good. Okay, so we kind of talked about
Mm,
both of them. Well, we talked about one of them when I talked about the dopamine, right? So if we have those good neurotransmitters because of the good bacteria in our gut, and it's able to send dopamine to our brain, that helps with memory, that helps with focus. But also, Alzheimer's now is being termed type 3 diabetes. And so that's really
Really?
important to note. Yes, like our
Wow.
blood sugars, that's why I really work with blood sugars as well, is so important because our brain cells require two main things to work well, and that is glucose, but that's glucose getting into the cell, and it's oxygen. And so when that glucose is not able to get into the cell, which usually happens when we have insulin resistance or poor control of blood sugars, then that's going to very much, affect our ability to think well, and those brain cells ultimately can get starved from not having that glucose in the cell due to insulin resistance and due to high blood sugars. So one of the things, right, that we really focus on is getting that blood sugar in control, and of course getting our gut health in check. And
So
and
the
yeah, as
mm,
far as like other ways to the ways that she can do that is, I would say, kind of that diet that we talked about earlier is working on the, anti-inflammatory foods that aren't going to raise your blood sugar, foods that aren't going to, the not processed foods that are going to destroy your gut integrity, those types of things.
yeah. Okay. All right, brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, Karen, I think we're getting to the end of the list. Karen asks, how are faith and gut health linked? And I think we've answered that.
Yeah.
Can I eat yogurt instead of taking probiotics?
Ooh, good one. I like that one. Yeah, you can. I would say always check the yogurt label for a couple of things. Um, that I would say check for that it does have live active cultures. Make sure it doesn't have a ton of sugar in it. I usually prefer like a higher fat yogurt just because I feel like that's going to raise our blood sugars less. The other thing is, and I don't know if this is a thing in the UK or not, but in the States, we have a sweetener called sucralose. And I'm surprised I haven't brought this up yet because this is another thing that we want to get out of our diets is sucralose. It's
Hmm.
Sucralose. And it is a sweetener. It's also known as Splenda, but it is a sweetener used because it's super cheap. So they put it in a ton of foods,
Hmm.
but a lot of times it's advertised as a food as zero sugar or, non-sugar,
Hmm.
sugar-free or whatever. But it is terrible for our gut. And so yogurts is a place that a lot of times they will use sucralose. They'll say, "No, it's a zero sugar yogurt," whatever. But you have to check that label. So what sucralose does is it is almost like being on chronic antibiotics. So, a couple of things that are,
Wow.
really bad for our gut is obviously antibiotics. They
Hmm.
can wipe out our good intestinal flora, our good
Hmm.
intestinal bacteria. And sucralose can do the same. And so many people don't realize it, but maybe in their like Celsius drinks or their energy drinks, like they are getting sucralose every single day. And it's like
Hmm.
destroying their gut because it's wiping out the good, right? So I'm so glad this was the question because I can't believe I haven't talked about sucralose yet. But really watch your yogurt to make sure it doesn't have sucralose. The other thing I would say is there's a lot of good fermented foods like kimchi, sauerkraut, kombucha, all of those things are really good. But remember, if you maybe already have some like, irritable bowel symptoms, that kind of thing, and we're just starting with step 3, that can sometimes make things worse before you're ever going to get better. You have to do that 4-hour process. But for some people that are, already pretty healthy and are just wanting to add, more different habits into their lifestyle, yeah, that yogurt would be great. And they usually, I think they say in like 2 tablespoons of sauerkraut, you get like, I don't know, 20 billion units of a probiotic. And I'm like,
Yeah. Wow.
that's pretty awesome. That's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
So that's good. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm just thinking flavored yogurts, for example. Because I mean,
So
that's what we give our kids, right? Because they won't eat
mhm.
plain yogurt, for example.
Yeah. So let's go back to that sucralose thing. And when I was saying, right, we want like yogurt on its own. Like I make my own yogurt. I just found out too not recently it was super simple. Like it was not that hard. But we when you make your own, it's plain. It tastes like sour cream. It's rather
Yeah.
unappealing. So I usually add stevia. Stevia is a really like it
Mm,
is more of your natural sweetener that doesn't have a lot of sugar. So if you're wanting to get rid of the sucralose in your life, sub that for stevia.
mm,
So yeah, for yogurts, right, you've got to watch those other things. Like, are they adding colors? Are they adding,
mm,
artificial flavoring, that kind of thing.
mm,
But if you just want to do your own, I always tell people, buy like just a plain, there's a Fage yogurt and it's Fage. I don't know if you can get that over there, but it is
no.
super good yogurt. It's super good, but it's plain. So you have to add a little stevia. A lot of times I'll add blueberries, I'll add nuts. Oh, it's phenomenal. It's
Mm.
so good and it's so good for your gut.
I'm
Yeah.
definitely going to have a look out for that.
Yes. Yes. And
I don't know if
they
you've got it yet.
it usually comes like in a 0%, 2%, or 5%. I always don't fear the fat. Fat is so good for our hormones. It doesn't raise our blood sugars. For a while there, it was like, go fat free, go fat. No, that was a
Mm,
big mistake. Don't
mm.
go fat free.
Does the same apply to men? Because
Yeah.
obviously we're talking about women and hormones, and obviously for us, seem to be, it affects us more than men.
Yeah. No, it
Okay.
does apply to men as well. Yeah, and men have hormones too,
Mm,
and but yes, it can even affect testosterone in men if we're cutting, like if they're on statin hormone or statin drugs for cholesterol. And so yes, it absolutely applies to men as well.
okay. All right.
Great
Good.
question.
Good.
Yeah.
Um, Corin also asks, is drinking lots of water enough to cleanse the gut, or do I have to do other things too?
Yeah,
So
so
I
of
think,
course, drinking water is amazing. I can't say enough about drinking really good, quality water. I do have a filtration system in my house, that so I know that I'm, drinking good water. But you're right. A lot of times, no, it just drinking water is not going to be enough. A lot of times it's going to require the 4 steps. But yeah, just remember to drink the water between the meals. And yeah, a lot of times it's going to require some other things along with that.
okay. And obviously, I mean, we have spoken about that. So
Yes.
the next question, the next couple of questions are by Shani. And I think we've already covered a lot of this, but I'm going to ask you anyway, just in case there's
Yeah.
something that you want to mention. So she
Yeah.
asks, can you reset gut health? How do I know my gut isn't healthy or normal? What are gut health must-do habits to ensure a healthy gut in adults and kids? And what are gut health don't-dos for kids and adults?
Sure.
There's
Okay.
a lot
Yeah.
there, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll do the best I can. So yeah, we've kind of talked about like what the 4 R's would entail, right?
Mm,
And so it's doing a lot of that. Now I want to go into how do I know if my gut health is not normal or unhealthy. And I
mm,
think that's the big thing of we know the symptoms of, okay, like bloating, constipation, like we already associate that with gut health, but it's the other symptoms. It's anxiety, depression, and it doesn't have to be all these. It can be two of these. Skin issues, eczema is a huge, like in kids, eczema is so much related to the gut. Okay. Skin issues, acne, brain fog, mood imbalances, migraines, joint pain, just so many different things. But I would say fatigue is a big one, like low energy, and the brain fog. I would say those are probably two of the biggest. But yeah, those are the symptoms you're going to know, okay, something isn't quite right yet. A lot of people just have that intuition that, okay, I've not always felt this way. Why do I feel this way now? And don't let people tell you it's because you're getting old, okay? Because even into our 70s and 80s, like if we have a healthy gut, we should still feel good, right? If we've learned to take care of ourselves. So that's the other things. Things that you can do to ensure a healthy gut, kind of what we talked about, just those whole foods, the foods God put on the earth, the unadulterated, like the foods that man has not come in and, sabotaged in a way. But I think too, it's really working on that stress, learning to just learning to just have that positive, um, mindset and loving, knowing that life is so beautiful, and just believing in the healing process, all of that. I think the mindset is huge, but also, just really focusing on the foods God put on the earth, and what he desires for our health. He desires us to not be stressed. He desires us to surrender to him. He desires us to eat the foods he gave us, from the beginning. So I think those are the things, even in kids. Okay, so this is another question that I commonly get. I want to do this program, Sarah, but I don't know about, is can my whole family do it? 100%. Like, I want your whole family to do it. I don't want your family to go through the same struggles you're going through someday because you made a separate meal for them and let them still eat the junk, and you created your own awesome meal, right? I will say with my own family, it took
Wow.
some time. It did, to make those changes, but I'm so glad we did. Do we never have treats? No, like my kids still love the junk. But we just learned to it's a balance. It's such a
Mm,
balance. Yeah.
absolutely. And there's so much, and it's like using the word limit, right? Balance
Yes,
is similar to using that
exactly.
word limit.
It
Wow.
is. It is. Yeah.
Mm. So Carol asks, how do I know if I have a gut fungal infection? What are the symptoms and how can I treat it naturally?
Yeah, gut fungal infections are pretty common. Like, okay, you've probably heard of like candida.
Mm.
That is like a yeast or fungal infection, but we can have that in our gut. And it is probably one of the most common forms of this, of like gut dysbiosis, candida in the gut. So yeah, it's again going through that process, but I would say that one of the biggest symptoms with candida is sugar cravings, because yeast thrives on sugar, yeast and fungal infections. That's how it grows. I mean, even think
Mm.
of like when you're like baking bread and you add that sugar to that yeast, it just makes it,
Yes.
grow even more. So that is happening in our gut. And again, it's that vicious cycle of, it makes the yeast grow, which makes us crave more sugar, which can be really, really hard. I don't know if ever, and this is kind of going just a little bit of a tangent, but if you've ever just cut sugar for maybe like done a 10-day sugar detox or whatever, and you often feel worse for a few days, like you have a little bit of, you kind of have some symptoms of, headaches and all these things. A lot of times that's due to the die off of candida. So
Wow.
basically, those cells are dying off and they release these endotoxins, which make us feel pretty junky for a few days. But once you get over that, you're a lot better and you've killed a ton of that yeast and whatnot. So I would say cutting sugar in a fungal infection is very important. And then you can add it back in slowly, but I wouldn't go back to how much you were having before.
Before. Mm.
And there are some supplements too. There are some supplements, like oregano is really good. There's some supplements just specifically for candida, like Candida Support by Now Foods is a good one. But again, it's kind of one of those things that it's a process.
Mm.
Yeah.
So it would, I mean, if she's asking how do I know if I have it, would the sugar craving be the top symptom?
Probably. So, okay, yeah, I'm glad you came back to that. So, fatigue is another big one. Fatigue is very common with candida. The skin issues can be, it's a lot of the things we already talked about, mood
Mm.
imbalances, um, the sometimes migraines, but a lot of times it's brain fog, and it can be some anxiety, it can be some
Mm.
depression. I would say sugar cravings and low energy, and like bloating are three pretty big ones with candida.
Yeah.
Yes. And itchy skin. Itchy skin is a very common one with that one as well.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
In terms of, I know that this isn't one of the questions, but leaky gut, how would you know if you had a leaky gut?
Yeah, so it's a lot of those same symptoms too,
Oh,
because a lot
really?
of times, right, if we're having dysbiosis, if we're having this imbalance of bad bacteria and whatnot, and like we eat certain foods and get headaches, or we eat certain foods and get the skin disturbances, A lot of that is because those proteins are getting into the bloodstream. Our immune system is like, wait, what is this thing, this foreign substance? So our immune system is acting on that. And that's where a lot of our symptoms, that's where that autoimmunity comes into. That's where a lot of our symptoms come from, because we're eating these foods and reacting to them because they're in our bloodstream instead of just going through our gut.
Mm.
And so, yeah, leaky gut is a ton of those same. If we have a lot of times, if we have dysbiosis and a lot of these symptoms, we have leaky gut. Like it
Wow.
all is hand in hand. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that. So we're on to our last question.
Awesome.
Laurie asks, and I guess we've touched on this as well. She says, in my 40s and I still struggle with hormonal breakouts. Is there anything you can suggest, please? I'm desperate.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. No, a lot of times, again, it's very much related to the gut. So another thing with our hormones is, again, we want to regulate our hormones by regulating insulin. But our when our gut is not functioning like it should, it's not also metabolizing that circulating estrogen like it should. And so a lot of times our hormonal breakouts can be due to our gut. Again, I was in my, late 30s and suffering from terrible acne. Like it would just be awful. And so when I was able to correct that leaky gut, that was when I have the clearest skin I've had, since before I was a teenager. So,
Wow.
but it's a lot of times fixing that. I would say too, tea tree oil is a really good oil to use, like on those spots as well. But a lot of times it comes down to, I would try a couple things. I would try limiting dairy. Dairy a lot of times can be the reason that we're struggling with those breakouts. But it can be fixing the gut, and then I would try like some tea tree oil as
Mm.
well.
Do you
So
dilute the tea tree oil?
I don't. That
Okay.
is one that I would just put it directly, even when I'm putting it on my kids, if they have like a sore or something. I do not dilute tea tree oil. Now, some people do with all their oils. That's kind of what you're comfortable with, I would say, but I don't feel like it's one that's, yeah, going to be super irritating.
Okay. That's good to
Yeah.
know. Well,
Yes.
Sarah, thank you so much. Oh
Yes.
my
This has
goodness.
been, this has been fun.
It has been so informative. I have to say that I've learned so much. And I'm
Good.
so grateful to everybody who submitted a question because
Those
this
were such good
really
questions.
it
Yeah.
covers such a broad range of things that people may be struggling with. And I
Yeah.
want to say also overcoming
Yeah.
because you are an overcomer when you are in Christ. So even though you may be facing a lot of these things, there are solutions out there that you can do and use that are simple. It doesn't have to be exceptionally complicated, but it does mean that you have to stick with a program because, like Sarah was explaining, there is a process that you have to go through to eliminate some of these things and symptoms that you're experiencing. And God created you to be beautiful, and He created us to walk in health, and divine life. So we need to learn what's out there. I think knowledge is definitely power. When we know these things and apply it, because there's two parts of knowledge, right? It's one thing to have the knowledge, but it's wisdom to apply it in our
Yes.
lives. So take this, and if you want to, and if you need more help, please reach out to Sarah. She is available. Sarah, maybe that's a good time to just ask you, where can people get in touch?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I do have a website, www.sarapaxtonnourish.com. And so you can, or you can always book a call. Just if you want to get on a call and see if you want to do the program, that is www.callwithsarah.com. But don't feel like are going to have to sign up with the program to when you're on that call. A lot of times I'm giving you insight as to what's going on with you. And then if you want to go through my program, I will give you those options, but I will also give you, other options that you can do on your own. So those would be the two I would say would be the best way to get a hold of me.
Brilliant. And I'll share all of that in the show notes as well. So I've got all of your details. But I am so grateful to you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I'm so glad that we met and that,
Me
God
too.
just had our paths cross because
Yeah.
there are many women that need this information. And yeah, so thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate that you're here. Always remember that you are loved, you are chosen, and that you are redeemed. So please share this video with somebody that you know needs it. You never know whose life you are called to impact. Like and subscribe to the channel, and please follow us for more. I'm sure we're going to have you on again, Sarah. I look forward to the next one.
Me too. Thank you so much, Cindy.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Lots of love. Goodbye.